Hi, good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Merci beaucoup pour votre patience. I was busy fighting a cyber criminal. Non, je fais des blagues. Merci beaucoup de votre patience. It's going to be totally worth it. Welcome to the Cybersecurity edition of our Fintech Drinks. My name is Nina May. I am the head of partnerships at Fintech Cadence, and I will be your host this evening. Now, just before we begin, it was important for us to take a minute to acknowledge the Indigenous people of all the lands that we're on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land, which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous people and their culture. So from coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that have been the traditional caretakers of this land for many thousands of years. I also hope that most of you get the day off tomorrow for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Now, for our evening, our event tonight, we're excited to present you with a great lineup of experts in cybersecurity. Ce soir, on a fait appel à des experts de l'industrie pour venir nous parler de cybersécurité. Mais moi, je suis un peu curieuse on vous a donné un peu plus de temps finalement. How was the networking before I got on? Did you guys get a chance to meet some cool people? Avez-vous fait des belles rencontres? Écoutez, if you didn't get the chance to network before, you'll have the chance again after the panel, so make sure you stay after the conference. Restez avec nous à la fin de la discussion pour continuer à réseauter avec les autres participants qui sont avec nous ce soir. Now, as it's a ritual with Fintech Drinks, I obviously want to know what you guys are drinking. So, écrivez-nous-le dans le chat. We want to know what's your poison of choice. In my case, I'm drinking what is probably my last Aperol spritz of the year. I'm holding on to summer. But I'm sharing this last summer cocktail with you tonight. So there you go. Let us know what you're drinking. Coffee, tea, tequila for the wild ones. We're curious and we just want to grab a drink with you. So cheers, everyone. Merci d'être avec nous ce soir. It's like sun in a cup. All right. Ce soir, on parle de cybersécurité, mais surtout de son importance compte tenu de la montée en flèche des cybercrimes et des cybermenaces cette dernière année qu'on a connue. So as you know, tonight, the event is on cybersecurity, especially in light of the rise in cybercrime and cyber threats. I'm very much looking forward to hear our panelists' perspective on the matter. So I think it's time that we kick off this event. So our agenda for tonight. First, I'll do a quick intro of our organization. Then I have a few announcements to make, and then we'll jump right into the panel. So I just want a quick reminder for all of you to write your questions during the panel conversations in the chat. We'll be asking them at the end during the Q&A section. Alors, écrivez vos questions dans le chat pendant la conversation plus tard. On va poser les questions à la session de questions à la fin. Puis aussi, restez après le panel pour continuer à rencontrer des gens dans les sessions de networking. All right, so Fintech Cadence, who we are. We're a nonprofit organization started in 2017, and we are Canada's Fintech Hub. Our mission is to develop Canada's future leaders, and we're able to do this by focusing on 3 pillars. So the first one is education. So we do a lot of work to introduce talent to the world of fintech. The second one is focused on supporting early stage fintech startups. And the third one is the collaboration work that we do with all the different stakeholders in the fintech ecosystem. We have 4 programs. So the certificate is an introductory course on fintech for professionals and university students alike. Our Ascension program is a 3-month incubation program designed specifically for early stage fintech startups. We have our Formathon, which is a 3-week open innovation competition where participants work on solving real industry challenges. And finally, our IFH Lab, it's a 6-month incubation program for fintech startups that are focused on bettering the financial lives of Canadians. By the way, our IFH Lab program is ending soon, and I would like to invite all of you in attendance tonight to come to our demo day on November 4th. It's going to be a really amazing event, and you'll get to see all the progress that the startups have made in the last 6 months. So Fintech Cadence, we also host 3 types of events throughout the year. So we have our Fintech Drinks, which you're attending tonight, a great networking opportunity to grab a cocktail and discuss industry relevant hot topics. Our uni series, those serves as introductions for universities, students across the country on fintech. And finally, our career fair, where job seekers and employers in fintech get the chance to connect. Now, as you may know, October is Cybersecurity Month, and there's certainly a lot happening. So we're currently working with Desjardins on a cybersecurity challenge. As you can see on your screen right now, the 16 fintech startups that were selected for the challenge, they come from all over Canada, from British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick, so great representation. And by the way, they're here with us tonight, so say hi to them in the chat. They were selected because they help Canadian businesses fight cyber threats. They're currently in the first phase of the challenge, and 5 of them will be selected as panelists next week. The big finale will be hosted on October 21st, so stay tuned for more details on that, and make sure to wish them good luck for the next phase. Now, in October, for those who are interested in starting a cybersecurity startup, the application for the Cooperathon/Deloitte Cybersecurity Challenge are still open for a few more days. So make sure to check out the link that's being posted in the chat right now for more information. And the Polytechnique Entrepreneurship Cybersecurity Program is starting soon. You have until October 17th to apply, so go for it. All right. Fintech Drinks are possible thanks to our amazing sponsors and partners. So first, I would like to thank EY, our platinum sponsor, as well as Expertis and Station Fintech, which are gold sponsors for Fintech Drinks. Now, our friends at Station Fintech are hosting their annual Fintech Forum presented by Portage on October 27th to 29th. So it's 3 days of conferences, bringing together over 70 speakers from across North America and Europe. The 3 main themes this year are financial services as a service, cybersecurity and data, and crypto and DeFi. Now, Fintech Cadence, we're longtime collaborators of the Fintech Forum, so we're really happy to be part of the conference once again this year. Make sure you grab your tickets at forumfintechcanada.com. I also want to give a quick shout out to our community partners, Yes Montreal, District 3, and Next Canada. All right, I think I made you wait long enough, and you're all ready for our main event tonight. I have the pleasure of leaving you in the good hands of Layal El Hadi, our Executive Director. She will be your moderator this evening. So Layal, I'll let you take it away and introduce our guest speakers for tonight.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nina, so much for the introduction. Really cool to see all the events that are happening. So make sure you guys are registered and you're following us and making sure that you're following all the events that we have. Nina, I see you're having a taste of summer. I think now I'm going to be the boring one, and I'm here drinking sparkling water, but it's always good to stay hydrated, right? So there we go. Water is the key to life. I'm also really excited to be here today to be presenting this panel and moderating this panel, rather. I know you guys are here to hear from the panelists, not to hear from me, but I do think it's important to provide a little bit of context of why this topic is one of the key topics right now. As we know, digitization has been happening as faster than expected. We know that over the last few years, a lot of products, a lot of services have been digitizing. But with the advent or with the experience of COVID, we see that it was happening at a lot more rapid pace. And cybersecurity is really the cornerstone of whether all of this digitization is going to be to our success or to our detriment. And so it's really important when we're looking at the development of fintech, when we're looking at the development of an innovation sector in general, it's always important to ensure that the consumers and those who are going to be interacting with these products are the ones who are safe. And that's why, as I mentioned, cybersecurity really is one of the key components that's going to help Canada become really successful in fintech. That's going to increase the uptake of fintech products, and that's going to increase the partnership between fintech startups as well as financial institutions. And All of this being said, I think it's really exciting to have this conversation in the context of what Canada's been doing. We have a lot of Canadian experts in cybersecurity, and I'm really excited to be able to be joined today by three of them who we're going to be able to ask a little bit more about what's been happening in the cybersecurity space. They have a wealth of experience, so we'll be able to dig in and really get to know about the landscape from their perspective. As Nina mentioned earlier, if you guys have any questions, make sure you put them on the chat. Our eyes are there. We're ready to watch all of them. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome to the stage our three panelists. So we're really lucky to have today Isha Ponnappa, who is the Executive Director of EY at Cybersecurity Financial Services. We also have Stephen Cohen, who is the VP Cybersecurity Practice at Centrilogic, and Régis Desmeules, who is an entrepreneur, angel investor, author, and independent consultant as well. Welcome to our panelists. How's everyone doing today?
Thank you. We're doing great.
Yeah, everyone's excited. I know we have a lot of people in the audience and in the chats who are really excited to hear from you guys. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. I did try and do a very quick introduction of you guys, but I think it's probably best for the audience to hear from you directly. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to do a quick introduction of themselves. But most importantly, as you introduce yourself, I'm going to ask you what you guys are drinking as well. So Isha, I'm going to hand it over to you for your introduction and an introduction of the drinks for the evening.
Awesome. Thanks, Laure. So I'm Isha Ponnappa. I'm an executive director within EY Cybersecurity Consulting Practice. I primarily focus on financial services, but in my past experience, I've pretty much touched multiple sectors, multiple geographies, as well as a wide range of cyber services. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for having me. The drink for the day. I have a Merlot with me. I also have water with it. I'm going to accompany you, Laure, for the most part with water.
That's wonderful to hear, Isha. It's always good to have that balance, right? A little bit of alcohol, a little bit of hydration. So we can have an actual panel, so that's good.
I actually wanted to go with water, and I thought I looked really boring if I came without a drink, like an actual
drink. I'll take the place of the boring one then for today. Stephen, on to you. Drink of choice and an introduction of your experience.
Thanks, Laure. So I'll start with the drink. I'm, I think, like Isha, and probably unlike Nina May, I'm heading into fall having a nice Aberlour single malt Scotch. So that's keeping me entertained this evening. And yeah, so again, my name is Stephen Cohen, and I've been working in cybersecurity for over 20 years. I had my own cybersecurity consulting firm. After that, I had a firm. I was a principal in a firm that specialized in managed security services that ultimately grew and got sold to a company called the Herjavec Group, which is owned by Robert Herjavec, who is on Shark Tank, if you're familiar with him. And most recently, I've joined Centrilogic, which is an end-to-end IT provider specializing in being digital ambassadors to help our customers translate and transfer into the digital world. And I run the cybersecurity practice. So I'm helping to make sure that as our clients move to the cloud, build out their applications, run their businesses digitally, that they're being secure as well.
That's wonderful, Stephen. I'm looking forward to, from everyone actually, I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about that experience. Régis, last but not least, drink of choice and introduction of your experience.
Yeah. So Laure, so I'm having a complex professional life. I have three sides. First of all, so I'm a cybersecurity IT entrepreneur for more than 20 years, working for industries such as banking, insurance, financial. I sold my cybersecurity company a couple of years ago. Now I continue to make some cybersecurity consulting as freelance for former clients. This is the first side. Second side, angel investor. I've seen so far more than 200 entrepreneur pitches for funding. I mean, so startup, pre-seed, and seed level. I've invested money within a dozen of startups in the last 4-5 years. Also acting as a board member, advisor for around 15 entrepreneurs. And finally, so I wrote 2 books. First one was a technical book implementing IPv6 network, published in 2005. This year, I've published a second book, a business book, a finance book. So it's in French only. So réussir son premier financement to help a startup entrepreneur with their first pre-seed seed round. And my drink. So like you, I'm drinking sparkling water, ice. So thank you, SodaStream.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for the introductions. And I'm glad to see the hydration. I'm also glad to see the very fancy drinks happening here as well. So, like we say, the only panel where you're encouraged to drink. And I'm also really excited to see the wealth of experience we have. Régis, you might be the first author we've ever had on the panel as well. So that's an exciting breakthrough for us and as well for the audience. All right, let's get straight into the questions. And before we get into the in-depth questions, let's start off with some quick rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask these questions to all of you guys quickly. And for the audience, if there's anything you want us to follow up on later on in the Q&A period, please feel free to let us know in the chat and we'll expand on them later. So first question, Isha, I'm going to start with you, go all the way to Régis. Régis, then I'm going to start with you following that. Isha, first question, what are you most excited about cybersecurity and working in the space?
I would say it's two things, right? One is it's challenging and it's evolving, right? So it keeps me on my feet for sure. The second one is the relevance, right? I mean, it's not just applicable to my professional life. I can also bring it home and just apply it to my personal life. So I feel it's so relevant.
Yes. And actually, Isha, that's wonderful to say, because later on in the panel, we're going to get into consumers, not only from our perspective of working in the space, but also as consumers, everyday people.
Right.
So that's really wonderful to hear. Stephen, on to you. What makes you most excited about cybersecurity and working in the space?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, I've been doing it for many, many years, and I still find it, I'm incredibly passionate about the subject and the topic. And I would say, like Isha, I mean, I find it's constantly changing. So what excites me is that, there's always new challenges, always new problems to be solved. Hackers are always trying new things. And so, to protect the customers that I work with, there's always new problems to be solved.
Yes, absolutely. And again, even more expansion, we're going to hit on that a little bit later. Régis, on to you. Most excited thing about cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I've decided to work in cyber as soon as 1998, so a long time ago. So at the beginning, it was probably by curiosity to start my first cybersecurity business as security consultant. So information security was a new trend, new space. Cyber was mostly related to mainframe security, network files, and so on. So, but over the year, my minding has evolved. During the last 10 years in business, so I provide probably cybersecurity advisory to enterprise SMB, helping them to make business more. Is very challenging because the threat is evolving a lot, and it's forced people, organization to adapt very quickly. Cyber specialist is not a boring job. So I'm trying to avoid boring things in my life in general, right?
All right. Yes, we could all learn from that for sure. All right, let's hit up again the bit of rapid fire questions. Régis, I'm going to start with you this time. What are the top 3 countries that are best at fighting cybersecurity?
Yeah. So interesting question. So my personal ranking, right? Number 1, US. Probably due to the size of its economy, presence in the world. So the US is probably the most targeted by cyber attack. Some industries, such as the military, so the 3-branch US Army, Navy, Air Force, banking, industrial industry, homeland. So they are investing billions of dollars to fight cyber attacks, right? So that's a key point. Second one, UK. Several also indexes, so they rank UK in the top 3 country targeted by cyber attacks, so in the world. And third, Israel, small country, 9 million people, a long history in military culture. So soldier, guns, physical structure. But today in the digital world, if a country cannot protect its cyber assets, the country is not secure. And some interesting numbers about Israel and cybersecurity. Some name. So they have a lot of unicorns. So in Israel. So I mean, so Checkpoint Software, CyberArk, Imperva, Sentinel-1, and many other. Just this year, cybersecurity firms, so in Israel, so they raised more than $3 billion during the first 6 months of the year. 50 deal, that's money. Same population than Quebec province. So I'm very impressed by those numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely astounding what they've been able to do. So we have the U.S. and Israel as well. Régis, those were your countries of choice?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's really wonderful to hear. And Stephen, I'm going to jump over to you with your 3 countries.
So some similarities. I got a little bit of a curveball. So my number one is also the U.S. For a lot of the same reasons that Régis mentioned. It's a big country, big economy, big target, and so they've got to build up the right protection. My number 2 is actually Israel, and I could probably, with Régis, talk for the full hour just about what they do from a cybersecurity perspective. They're definitely a global global country that's viewed as being very, very strong in cyber. My third choice is actually Russia. Now, although Russia is known a lot for its more offensive and attack, they actually are a big target in and of themselves, and they've actually developed a pretty sophisticated and significant capability to fight against cyber threats. I would, give a little bit of snaps and mention to Canada as well, and we can talk about that a little bit later. It's probably not in the top 3, but it's, I would say, definitely in the top 10 and moving up, maybe even in the top 5.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm looking forward to hear why they're moving up and maybe why they're not top 3 right now. Yeah. Isha, any difference on your top 3 countries?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, if you had asked me first, I'd have said, it's for me, it was a little hard to pick the 3, honestly. I would have gone with most developed countries. I think they're well set for, prepared to actually face the cyber threats. Of course, I think the Five Eyes countries, right, which of course includes US, UK for sure, right, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. I would even add to Israel. I mean, it's no brainer, right? You can't not talk about Israel. You can't not talk about Russia or China. So I think overall, I think most countries are investing because this is where the world is going, right? And of course, there's multiple variables to it, and some are good in one area, the other ones are not so much. US gets targeted the most, right? So they have no choice, right, to be on top of everything. Of course, we can talk a little more about it later, probably, but that would be my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you guys said, right, it's the geopolitics, it's the nature, it's the size, it's the economic power that would encourage all of that to happen. Isha, this time I'm going to start with you. What are the most exciting applications or features that you're seeing happening right now in the fight against cybersecurity? And since we are fintech, let's see if we can think of some fintech ones here.
I was going to say machine learning, which cuts across fintech, take any sector, anywhere, right? Like it just applies, right? It's not a new concept, right? It's been around for a long time. It's just the practical applications are so real today, and that's why I would choose that.
Perfect. Stephen, on your side?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna concur. I definitely had machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think we're still in the early stages of how that's being used. I would give one specific example where, in particular, endpoint detection and response EDR solutions have significantly been improved as a result of MDR and have become a key element in fighting cyber threats and cyber attacks.
Okay, wonderful, Stephen. And Régis, we're off to you.
Yeah. So for sure. So AI and machine learning. Well, but cybersecurity is like an onion, right? I mean, so not a vegetable, but onion, because it requires a multi-layer approach, right? So a good security is not just technical application. It involves people, HR, specialists, processes, policy, governance, and so on. So I like what they have done in Europe with GDPR, right? General Data Protection Regulation, and Also, so we are seeing new emerging security models such as zero trust architecture, SASE, service access, service edge. I'm not. It's not the place to explain. So those secure model, but I think it's important to consider just more than. Applications. So in cybersecurity, it's a multi-layer, right? That's my thought on that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful to hear.
I
And
would
then
actually throw one more into it, which would be privacy enhancing techniques or technologies around it.
okay, right. Okay, that's wonderful. I don't know, Isha, if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on that.
No, I talk more. Basically, like, considering, Régis brought up GDPR, I just felt like, again, this is another area which is we're in the initial stages, right? But with the amount of data we have, the digitization, right? The consumer's biggest concern, which is, of course, protecting our data, right? And even for the organizations, they have to think about consumer trust is so important, right? How do we enable that? And privacy enhancing technologies, one such technology which could actually do that. We can talk in detail. I know it's a rapid fire, so I'm trying to not go beyond the 30 seconds there.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think our rapid fire has evolved into panel questions, but we're going to go with it. It's a wonderful night. Everyone has drinks. We're talking about a really exciting topic, so we're just going to go with the flow. Now, you guys as a collective have been in this space for a really long time. Wonderful looking, very, very young looking. But with all of this experience, what's one thing you wish people knew better about protecting their data, especially that you interact with and you see on a daily basis? And Stephen, since we haven't given you the start, I'm going to jump with you right away.
All right. Thanks, Leah. Yeah, the thing that resonates with me, and people may realize this, but it always keeps repeating, is there's a security mantra that I heard since I started in security, which is trust but verify. And if you think of financial services in the fintech community, that whole interaction between consumers and organizations is based on trust. But fundamentally, you have to have a level of security and a mechanism to actually verify that you're trusting the right people and not trusting the wrong people. And so I think that's really, organizations, technology companies have a tendency to often go down the road of really focusing on great new features and great new capabilities and making things flexible. And you need that to succeed, but you also need to build it on a foundation of trust.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Stephen, we're going to get into open banking a little bit later on, the hot topic for fintech. And yes, we found a way to include open banking in cybersecurity chat, but I think we're also going to be able to touch on that as well in a little bit. So thank you for bringing that up in the matter of trusting the right thing. Régis, we're going to go with you.
Yeah, I think so. From my point of view, it's user behavior in the digital world. So for example, so never say it won't happen to me or to us. So the overconfidence, right? Be careful about what you do on your smartphone, your computer. Some statistics I've found affects 1 in 20 American each year. So it's big number. So it will probably happen to you for sure, right? And probably finally, so protect yourself against yourself. So have a better user behavior, right? So this is my the thing. So I wish people knew about protecting their privacy, their data.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. I think the statistics, like some of you already mentioned, are shocking at how often it happens. And I think that's really key. Isha, we're going to end this rapid fire / unrapid fire segment with you. What's one thing you wish people knew about protecting their data?
I concur with what Stephen and Régis said, right? In addition, I would say it's also common sense, right? If you understand your data, is actually your asset. It's probably more important than money at some point, right? If you understand that your intent is right, it's common sense, and you can do a lot with just Googling stuff, right? You don't need an expert for it. Yeah, I would just close off with that.
Yeah, perfect. That's wonderful. Everything is with Google, right? So that's really good. Perfect. So let's settle in a little bit and let's start exploring some of these topics that we've touched on really quickly here. I know for today, our main theme is gatekeepers and collaboration in the age of cyber threats. I want to look at it from the perspective of all the hackers that we've been mentioning before and the race to secure our businesses and our services to consumers. Do you guys believe that the industry is adapting rapidly enough to match the sophistication of what we're seeing from cyber criminals? Are we catching up consistently, or are we ahead sometimes? Are we able to kind of get ahead of what's happening? And I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to jump in first.
So I can I could begin. So to respond to your question, so unfortunately not. So it has improved, but still not enough from my point of view, right? So why? So the industry developed new software and IT. So they built new software, new device, new solution at a very rapid pace, with few quality assurance, right? So I call that so insecure by design, right? So I'm pretty sure you have ever heard about insecure by design. Just think to IoT device, Internet of Things device, cheap device. They arrive so rapidly on the market. Few quality in the design. Billion and billion of IoT device have been deployed so far, and several billion to come in the next year. So IoT device, so they could have so a lot of flaw, allowing cyber criminal to exploit the vulnerability and compromise your network and your data, right? It's the paradise for cyber criminals, right? This is my point of view. They are using both AI to perform sophisticated so attacks. The threat is evolving so on a daily basis. Though so the industry is still reactive about the rapid sophistication of the cyber criminal. This is my opinion, but I'm very curious to hear Isha and Stephen on that.
Yes, as am I. Go ahead, Stephen. Sorry.
No, I was going to say. So I would concur in general with what you said, Régis. I'm not sure we're there yet. From my perspective, I think the last probably 5 to 10 years, a big part of what's driven the need for cybersecurity has all been regulatory driven, which has been actually good, not only for the industry, but to get companies to be aware of cybersecurity and the need for cybersecurity. The problem is, if you think about it, most regulations take several years to actually get in place. And then it takes several years after that for companies to actually implement and meet the regulation. And the regulation is typically the bare minimum. Meanwhile, on the other side, all of the attackers and the potential threats to your organization are evolving. They're aware of the regulation, they're aware of the technologies that people are using, and they're constantly working on ways to get around that. And so I think that we've got to find ways to continue to evolve, but probably at an even faster rate going forward in order to somehow catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Isha, love to hear your thoughts
I would concur with both of them. But I also feel like, I think the industry is doing a great job, right? Overall, working very hard to make it work. It's also that, for adversaries, they just have to get it right once, right? Like the industry has to get it right every single time. And, that's one reason I feel like, irrespective of how fast we go, right, we're always we're too huge, right? So we're always going to be behind than the adversaries. Right. Last year when the SolarWinds attack happened, it was just one small backdoor, right, which really could get into hundreds of organizations in no time. So it's really that one door, right, versus the industry having to work really, really hard.
Well, I really love what you're saying there. So it's a really great insight there, and I really love that point. I'm not sure, Isha, if that was yours or it's around the cybersecurity, but we have the fact that companies have to be right all the time, and adversaries have to just be right one time. I think that's really powerful in seeing what companies and fintechs are up against really every single day, and consumers. And speaking about consumers, now that we're kind of we touched on it a little bit earlier in our infamous rapid questions, but from the consumer's perspectives, what are the top areas of concerns that they should be careful with? Like, what should they be consistently looking at to educate themselves on, Isha, as you said, through Google, or be aware of consistently?
I would start with saying, like, don't overshare, right? Like, truly understand, like, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? I think that's one of the biggest concern if you really need to share more. The other thing is like basic things. It could be like you go on a website, you see the cookies that pop up, right? And you see more and more these days, they're becoming obvious. It's asking you, do you actually want to activate all your cookies, right? Making small steps like that, right? Really saying, I don't want any optional cookies, right? Just the ones that is really needed to do whatever I need to do here. I think those small steps would really help consumers. I would definitely say everybody should make an effort to learn a little more about cyber, because it is truly a part, like there is no more, cyber being just a professional career, right? It's there, but then it's also converged into our personal lives. So you can't really ignore it. I would say, and there's a ton of information, right? Like anywhere you go, you have a ton of information. The organizations, the banks, the insurance companies, they're all putting out data there, right? All you have to do is just spend like, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes a month, or maybe even lesser, right? Just to make yourself aware and be cautious.
Yeah, absolutely. And Isha, I'm going to divert a little bit from our questions because I think you touched on something that's really interesting. And I want to, I read an article, and forgive me, I don't remember the article or the source, but where they said there's almost cookie fatigue from consumers, where they at this point don't want to be asked. They're used to their apps being slick and not too many questions, and apps are being designed so that it's asking consumers as little as possible so that it's a streamlined process. And yet here we're saying, and I completely agree with you, but here we're saying, read the cookies. They're coming up for your protection. How do we kind of do that for consumer protection, but at the same time navigate the fatigue that consumers will feel by consistently having to see, okay, I want this cookie, I don't care, just get off my screen kind of thing?
I don't know if you can actually get away with it, right? But you will get really faster at it, right? You don't have to read the whole thing. Like, it's becoming very typical. You'll see the 3 options. You just have to do the same thing every single time, right? So, it's just the cost of just wanting to save yourself, your data, and, potentially all the money you have in your banks too.
Yes, that should be incentive enough. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a great point, but I would add, like, even more than and cookies is just the surface layer. Trying to read an end user agreement for a piece of software that you're going to use and how your data is being used is a nightmare. And frankly, very often you don't have much of a choice because you need to use, if it's something that's work related or something that you need to actually get your job done, it's very, very hard to spend the time to go through it. And even if you go through it, your option is you use it or you don't use it. There's no in between. You can't negotiate with anyone, especially as a consumer, on any kind of agreement or even the cookie selection. More often, you may have a little bit of flexibility, but there's not a lot. That certain tools, they'll tell you that we need your cookies just in order for the application to run. So I think it's a great point. I think you just need to be aware of it. The other thing I would add is just know your data. Know what your data is, know where your data resides, know which data that you want to protect and you don't want to share, and you don't want to have people to have access to it, versus what's information that you're fine to share publicly. I think in any way that you use online applications or online tools, absolutely you should be consciously thinking of that as you're using them and as you're interacting with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to touch a little bit on that burden in the future. I think what kind of scares consumers is that management of their data, right? And Isha, in connection to what you were saying, which is don't overshare, mixing those two things together, it becomes quite overwhelming for consumers. And I think the fear, at least from my perspective, is then consumers will default to the less secure options because we're not necessarily seeing a pattern of consumers sharing their information less. So I'm also curious to see what happens with that. Régis, is there anything you wanted to add up to this?
So I'm totally agreeing with Isha and Steven. I have also another opinion on that. So I think sharing personal and sensitive data with fintech should be a very important concern too, right? So I've been in several also due diligence with startup related to investment process. I remember a fintech. I will not identify it. They collect username and password of a consumer bank account, right? and then they store such information into their fintech database, right? So personally, I'm cybersecurity professional, so I should never share so sensitive information with someone else, or my user ID and password of bank account, right? So I'm expecting fintechs must have in place several control to ensure protection of consumer data. That's key, and fintech must demonstrate consumer that doing business in a secure way and protecting data, consumer data is a top priority, right? So it's the other side of maybe your question, Leah.
And it's a great point, Régis. I would just add, like, I think from a fintech perspective, if you're an organization that is dealing with consumer data, you should be asking yourself, all the time, do I actually need this consumer data? Is it important for me to have my tool be effective? Because you're potentially exposing yourself, whether it's from a liability perspective or a brand perspective, if you get hacked into. And so, think about first, do you need the data? And if you absolutely need it in order to be successful, how are you properly protecting? Make sure that data, if it is in any way considered, PII considered, private information considered confidential information, that you're protecting it effectively.
Mm-hmm. And I think, we can jump into the fintech perspective here for a little bit, because I think, a lot of our audience are either working for fintechs or are fintechs, running fintechs, or thinking of building their own fintechs. And I think it's kind of a heart-to-heart conversation that we consistently need to have with them, and that they're also struggling with, right? And that question is around the necessity of keeping cybersecurity at top of their mind when they are working so closely with data, with consumer products and data. I am curious to hear if there are any that you think are doing really well, and there's some that I've kind of highlighted to you, whether they're cybersecurity companies specifically or fintechs that have a really great cybersecurity process. And then we can talk about not the ones who are not doing it well. We won't name any names, but then we can talk about what can fintechs truly do from there. But I'll just hand it over to you guys. Any fintechs that you think are doing really well in the terms of cybersecurity?
So maybe I could start. So you won't have name, right? So you're looking for a name of fintech. So not. It's difficult to respond to such question. So Leah, cause we should perform a kind of a cybersecurity assessment first, right? To pretend that fintech is secure and this one is less secure. So that's, so in the banking industries, right? For example, insurance and so on. Most of the time, they are customer of fintech, right? They have to meet requirements, cybersecurity requirement, regulation, and so on. I think it's very important for the fintech to know what your customer practice are, right? If they have to comply with GDRP or PCI DSS or so on, be sure to meet these requirements. You have maybe no obligation to be fully certified, but at least be aligned with the search regulation. This is also, it's not I know I'm not responding directly to your question. It's again but I think it's important, right? So and from my point of view, a fintech, a startup, they must reach what I call the secure enough strategy. What is the secure enough strategy? So investing a maximum to meet minimum requirement, right? So that's a key point for me, because a startup by definition has a few money, few expertise in cybersecurity and so on. So they must comply. They must align with regulation, with the customer requirement. That's important, right?
Perfect. Thank you, Régis. Isha, Stephen, are there startups specifically that you have in mind that are you're doing really well?
I don't know about Stephen, but of course I can't take any names. I can talk to the trends though. right? If they are well-established or rising fintech, we definitely see a much higher rigor of cyber. If they're associated with a balance sheet of a regulated organization, we definitely see a rigor around cyber, right? Somebody who's just starting up, maybe maybe not so much, but I think Régis made a great point. If they are required to meet some of the requirements, like they will obviously have a good mature process around it. Right, that's sort of the trends I've seen. And Stephen, if you, I don't know if you want to add anything, or maybe name a company.
No, and for the same reasons, I think as both of you, there's no one that I would feel comfortable actually naming. But I think it's I mean, there are companies that are doing good work, and I think one of the things that smaller companies and fintech startups can really do a good job in that doesn't cost a lot of money. And I've had my own startup, so I can appreciate, when you don't have a lot of money, you can't spend a lot of money. But if you can spend it on things, because it's better to spend the money early on. It's actually easier to implement security processes and security technologies when you're smaller. Than I've seen lots of, and I'm sure Isha and Régis can also say, when big companies try and implement security technologies or processes, it can be a nightmare because they're so big and there's so much inertia. It's very, very difficult to change. So the fact that you're small and nimble, I think, is a big thing. The other thing I would mention too is education. I mean, there's a lot of education out there that's free. Make sure you're up to speed. Make sure you know what the security regulatory requirements. I mean, that you have to know, but also Régis and mentioned before. I mean, there's a lot of new up and coming technologies. Make sure you're aware of that technology, even if you're not using it today. That okay, when you get to a certain size, that's the direction you want to go, because that technology will help you, as opposed to trying to fit it in after the fact, which can be very, very difficult to do. So that's where I would say successful fintech companies have sort of had that security first, cybersecurity first mindset, where they're maybe not implementing everything, but they're aware of what they're going to implement as they grow.
Well, the other thing I would also add is, we've also seen a lot of fintech firms who are who have a potential to have a huge growth, and they know security is like their bread and butter. Like they really can't do without security. They really look up to some of the chartered banks and see what are some of the things that they need as a foundational risk management, not necessarily cyber risk management, across the board, right? Look at all types of risk management and see what is needed to foundationally build, right? And be aware, not necessarily have to do everything, but get your foundations right as well. That's another thing I would add.
Yeah. So and Leia, so I could give some example of what I mean by secure enough strategy for startup, for fintech. So it's a low cost strategy. So for example, onboard a cybersecurity consultant part-time, right, for advisory, perform security assessment on your control, pay for pen testing frequently when you're releasing new code, transfer some risk, cloud provider, cyber insurance, and so on. So when you have few money for cybersecurity, that's example of tips, right? You could do quick win, low cost, but certification is probably too expensive for you, right? Certification to regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. This is absolutely wonderful. I can't believe I just got prompted for one last question. The time went by incredibly fast, and we barely scratched the surface of all the things we wanted to talk about. We do have a bit of space open for Q&A. So if you guys are in the chat or in the audience and you have questions specifically, perhaps one that we haven't had a chance to ask, please ask it right now, and I'll make sure to include it in the Q&A portion. But I can't leave without talking about open banking. I know we mentioned it earlier. I'm interested to hear your thoughts about when and if open banking comes to Canada. Let's hope. How is that going to change the cybersecurity landscape? Is it going to have any kind of impact? What are your thoughts there? And Stephen, maybe I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have a crystal ball on open banking. It involves the government to approve, which I think is somewhat on their roadmap, but I haven't seen anything in terms of a timeline, so I wouldn't want to bet on when I think that's going to happen. But in terms of how it will change the Canadian banking landscape, I think it'll have significant change in some areas, but I think you really have to as a fintech organization. I don't necessarily see it as you're competing with sort of the traditional banks, and I think you have to have a business model that you're adding value, whether customers are using, because I don't think customers are necessarily going to move in large flocks from their traditional banks. Canadians as consumers, in my experience, and I've worked with organizations across all different industries, we tend to be very conservative. We like our big organizations. And so, we're hesitant to change. And so you have to really give people a reason and a means to change and really have a very strong value proposition in order to get that change through.
All right, perfect. Isha, I'm going to come to you. Thoughts on how cybersecurity is going to impact, or how open banking is going to impact cybersecurity?
Sure. You know what? Before I get there, I'm going to be the optimistic one to say that I think it will happen. Will it happen by January 2023? I don't know. Right? It's a little bit of a stretch. But I think there is huge convergence between just open banking and cyber. Right? We cannot not look at it. APIs, right? How do we do open banking? That's a core. Data sharing is core, right? When you have APIs and you have data, you can't not really think about cyber. And as I think about it, in the cyber world, we have multiple domains that we look at, right? Third party is another one, right? So we look at multiple domains. So there is application security. There's going to be our API security. There's going to be how do you secure your data. There's going to be what kind of requirements do you want these third parties to kind of meet to be able to access this data. How are we going to run some of the incident simulations if there were an incident? Who's really liable, right? I think it's going to people might do, there could be an option of, are we going to build in-house? Are we going to buy from externally? That also is going to impact some of the cyber decisions, right? So of course, I think cyber is very, very tightly tied into open banking concept.
Okay, perfect. Well, glad to hear an optimist about open banking, because I know we've been talking about it for a while. Régis, last thoughts on this?
Yeah. So European countries are far in advance in open banking. So they have the PSD2 regulation, Payment Service Directive 2 regulation. They vote that in Parliament in 2015. This is in force in 2019. The bank must provide API solution to external third part, and within their regulation, they are cybersecurity requirement. Okay, that's important. So in North America, unfortunately, we are not there. Open banking means industry standard regulation, right? And from my point of view, it's not realistic to have large-scale open banking in US and Canada banking at short term, right? So it's a matter of regulation. So they must have standard, they must have a similar regulation, allowing them to connect each other, because the banking, financial, insurance, payment, it's a very, very complex ecosystem, and all members of the ecosystem must change. So it's a big transformation. So open banking. So this is my opinion. So wait until regulation, US and Canada. In Europe, so they have business driven by regulation, but in North America, it's industry driven. So it's a completely different model. And open banking, probably we're going to see some initiatives in North America, but it won't be homogeneous. It will be very different. So depending and industry. This is my opinion again. So I read years ago a lot of paper about European open banking regulation. So this is why I'm talking to you about Europe. So this is very interesting what they are doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're the footprint at times for us. They seem to be a few years ahead of us. So it's a great connection to make. Isha, did you want to jump in with one last?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to it saying, I think in Canada, they did something interesting, right? They didn't make it regulatory driven, they didn't make it market driven. I have a feeling they're just trying to test the waters, right? See how the consumers behave, see if there's going to be adoption, and maybe kind of evolve. That's the optimistic in me that's kind of speaking. But I agree with Régis. If it's regulatory driven, it's going to happen, right? There's no doubts about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been given a couple of prompts, so I will have to wrap up the panel today. Like I said, there's no way we could have asked all the questions and pick your brain and expand on all the knowledge that all three of you bring to the table today. But hopefully we've started a few dialogues. For the audience, we have your questions. I'll be asking some of them really quickly to the panelists. And then, of course, if you guys want to expand a bit more for the audience members, please note we do have a networking component right after we're done the Q&A, so stick around for that as well. All right, my dear panelists, we're going to get into the questions asked by the audience. And I'm going to start with one from Jonathan Gagny, who's asking, now that we know which country invests the most in cybersecurity, which vertical and horizontal are they investing the most in within the cybersecurity space?
I'll take the question, but I don't know for sure, right? Like there is some of it is open source, some of it is not open source. Intelligence is always important, right? It's all countries or if it's even organizations, right? So I would like to think it's intelligence.
Yeah, and intelligence that can be used across the board. So I've seen, U.S. and Israel's examples that we talked about. Like they're investing in intelligence that can be used by their financial services industry, by their healthcare industry, by their technology industry. So it's information that can be shared and used across the board, not particularly for an industry.
Okay, perfect. And Régis, anything additional?
So maybe in military, this is undisclosed information, so we don't know. We know they are doing a lot, but probably from a point of view, so banking, because they have big money, they can afford cybersecurity costs, right? So I, Jonathan, from Faith, probably. I know you, I think.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on to another question here. This one was asked by Sujit Das. And the question is, what kind of framework should financial service organizations look at while building a cybersecurity strategy or improving their overall posture? Anyone care to jump in on that one?
Sure. I think, the one framework that I'm pretty sure all of us will agree here is probably NIST CSF. Like it's like 853.2. It's just easy. Regulators love them, right? So if you just build on top of it, you'll pretty much get everything that other frameworks have as well. So it's a good framework to go with.
Right. Perfect. Thank you, Isha. Stephen, Régis, anything additional there?
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, Isha's bang on. I mean, this is definitely probably the most commonly used. I still have a lot of customers and a lot of organizations that use ISO as well as the framework, and those are kind of probably the two most common. And then individual sort of regulatory frameworks depending on the industry and depending on the geographical location.
And so I'm going to add maybe other, so I call that certification, regulation, PCI DSS for a credit card industry, SOC 2, security compliance standard, PIPEDA, which is not a framework, but it's a regulation to protect privacy, consumer data, right? So there are other regulations. So in Europe, Asia, so it's, I call that regional regulations, right? So you must be aware of that, and the trick is be aligned, not necessarily certify on that.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much for that. All right, we're going to we have 2 quick minutes, so I'm going to tackle as many questions as possible. Régis, you were right. Jonathan Gagny is from Faith, so that's correct. Another one startup in our Desjardins cybersecurity. So I'm going to go on to Doug's question, which is, what is the biggest qualitative factors for consumers to trust the cybersecurity of products they use? For example, if they are unaware of back-end programming and protection.
That's a deep question, eh? So, I mean, I think I'm going to think out loud here, but Stephen and Régis just join in. I would start with the things like, end user agreement that Stephen talked about, or like how easy do they actually make it for you, right? How out there are they for you, right? I mean, and a lot of times organizations actually talk about their cybersecurity policy, their privacy policy. They talk about what they have. As a consumer, it's a little difficult to know about, how exactly things are going. If they're regulated, most likely they could be okay, right? But of course, there's no other way to know unless really just following the industry and seeing what's happening in the market.
All right.
I don't know, Stephen, Régis, is there any other way as a consumer you would? Yeah, it's difficult.
Nothing to add.
And a lot of consumers, I would say, I mean, unless you're really educated on and up to speed on it, you probably are not that concerned about the sophistication of what goes on behind the screens. And frankly, most companies probably wouldn't agree to tell you anyway. But what I would say is, if you can have certifications for what you're doing for your service delivery, as an example, Régis mentioned before, SOC 2 is specifically a certification designed for service delivery. So, if you can have those kind of things, that gives people sort of a stamp of trust that you can easily display. And again, people who are in the know kind of understand what that means and what that entails.
I would also add, I think how much the organization has to lose, right, probably will also make them to want to invest in cyber, right? But that's no indication, honestly, right? This is all assumptions that we could potentially make.
So I've personally invest in 2 startups. One is fully compliant, so with the PCI DSS, they have the certification. The other is SOC 2. So because one of their big customers, so they require to have their SOC 2 certification. And I have other investment in startup. They are probably aligned with ISO 27K. So it depends of the industry, the domain, and so on. But know your customer requirement. That's a key point. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Doug Belford, for that question. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the panel today. Isha, Stephen, Régis, I can't thank you enough for coming and spending a Wednesday evening with us. I saw none of you took drinks or sips out of your drink. So I'm going to say that now the panel is done. I hope you guys are able to enjoy the rest of your drinks. We really appreciate the wealth of knowledge and expertise that you guys came in with. I know we were only able to scratch the surface, but it's always important to start these kind of dialogues and hopefully have those seeds planted to continue the conversations moving forward. So Isha, Stephen, and Régis, thank you guys again very much on behalf of FinTech Cadence and the audience today. And I will thank you for your time this evening. For everybody else, I do apologize. We didn't have a chance to ask all the questions, but like I said, we will have some networking happening right now. So if you guys are interested in meeting some of the other audience members who are here today, we have a real rapid fire, 3 minutes networking happening for you guys in the networking section. So make sure you go and check it out wherever you see that on the Hopin. Very quickly before I end the FinTech Drinks for today, I want to remind you guys of a few quick things that Nina mentioned earlier on. The first is that we will be having our last FinTech Drinks. I know I can't believe 2021 has gone by this fast, but we will be having our last FinTech Drinks of the year happening in November 16th. And this year is going to be very exciting. And for this edition, it's going to be very exciting because we will be doing it in partnership with Holt Accelerator, where they're having the end of year show. We'll be partnering up with them for that. It will be done as a hybrid. So if you guys are sick of being in virtual events, then we'll be doing it in person in Montreal. And if you do not have the ability to come to Montreal or you still want to be virtual, then we will also be having the ability for you to stream the show on that day. The last thing I'm going to comment on is Demo Day for IFH is coming up. 4 provinces, 8 startups with one mission, improving the financial lives of Canadians. Make sure you do not miss this Demo Day. It's going to be really great to hear about these 8 startups that are creating and focusing on impact. That's on November 4th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, virtual and free. So make sure you register. All the links should be on the chat or will be sent on the chat shortly. We hope everyone has a wonderful evening. It's been a pleasure spending tonight with you guys. I hope you're able to stick around for FinTech Drinks networking and see you soon, hopefully in person, but if not, then virtually in our next event. Have a wonderful evening.